Hello, respected viewers. Here I am in front of the statue of Ghanshyam Das Birla in Golders Green Crematorium, London. So D Birla, as is usually known, was born in 1894 in Jilani. It was now the Indian state of Rajasthan. Of course, it was then under the British Raj. Now, most of that Rajputana agency, as they used to call it, that Marwari area, was they were divided to princely states, ruled by various Maharajas. I'm not sure if Jilani was one of those or whether it was directly under British superintendence, because the United Kingdom pursued this policy of diarchy. In some cases, the indigenous rulers, they would rule. In some cases, there was a Britannic administration. Anyway, Mr. Birla, his father was a highly successful businessman and had established his business throughout India, dealing in cotton, jute, tea, other commodities, money lending as well, mainly in what was then Bombay, now Mumbai, India's largest city, and to this day its major entrepot, as well as Calcutta, so then it was Kolkata, as it's subsequently been renamed. So they were a Hindu family, I'm not sure of which caste, Vedya, I think I'm right in saying. So he didn't pursue higher education. Remember, when he was a child, literacy rate in India was under 20%, but he was definitely literate, spoke fluent English, and although they were there from Rajasthan, he spoke mostly Hindi. He wrote several books, mostly in Hindi. He wrote one on knowing Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, whom we first met in 1916, and he wrote that in English, and he wrote, I think it's The Path of Prosperity, also in English. So he was a man of attainments. I don't think they were ghost-written, so they're quite engaging, have a certain lyricism to them, despite, as I say, him not pursuing education beyond his mid-teens. But that was perfectly normal, even for quite wealthy people at the time. There wasn't this fixation with education. But perhaps it's because he may have felt he ought to have gone further with his education that he founded various schools, like there's a Birla school, there's a Birla Institute of Technology, he founded a textile institute and so forth. So he spent a lot of his professional life in Mumbai, and he spread out the family business, so had a wider risk portfolio, not just being on one commodity, which of course was fluctuation, but sort of vulnerable to fluctuation in world prices. So he found that the British authorities, they preferred to sign contracts with white Britons resident in India. I felt he discriminated against them. He was known for treating his workers fairly well. There being no minimum wage, really no health and safety at work, no regulations, no welfare, no sick pay, blah, 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 no paid holidays. He was known for being a relatively generous and kind employer. And he thought, well, a happy worker is a hard worker and attract the best people rather than people who've got no alternative. And if they do get a better option, they'll leave as soon as they can. People who are skilled and motivated. Anyway, so he was not terribly political at first. He later got involved in the Congress Party, but he was not involved in any illegal demonstrations. He was never jailed, so far as I know, never arrested either. But in 1916, the United Kingdom was desperate for production in various areas, even things indirectly related to the war, like cotton. Just to make uniforms and stuff like that. So they signed fat contracts with him, and that's became very wealthy. By the 1920s, he was a multi-millionaire in Indian rupees, and he was not far off that in pound sterling. Bear in mind, £1 then is worth over £100 today. So he married twice. I'm not sure if he had any children with his first wife. Then she died. He married a second time, had 3 sons with the second wife. I don't believe he had any daughters. So he was a fairly observant Hindu. So in 1916, he met Gandhiji, as many call him, who'd come back from South Africa before the First World War, and he was deeply impressed with his spirituality and beginning to believe that India ought to have greater self-governance. Now, the United Kingdom had strongly hinted that there would be major reform after the First World War. And of course, when the First World War came to an end in November 1918, many Indian politicians said, well, we threw in our lot with you, a great risk to India. We encouraged men to step forward and to defend the British Empire and so on. So we want payback. We want major reform, a much greater deal of autonomy, if not necessarily outright independence. But they said the Morley-Minto reforms were pretend reforms, that Viscount Chelmsford, who was the Viceroy of India, he was not amenable to a serious reform. There was only pretend reform. There was the Rowlatt Act, the Black Acts, as Indians called them. There was severe restrictions on civil liberty. Of course, the Treaty of Versailles wasn't signed till June 1919. Therefore, it wasn't absolutely clear that the war was over. Moreover, in the Russian Revolution, they felt there was Bolshevik evidence everywhere. The United Kingdom was very jumpy. It was a jittery moment for British self-confidence, despite victory in the First World War. People even thought there might be attempted communist revolution in the UK. There was an insurgency in Ireland and so forth. But anyway, so many Indian nationalists who'd been constitutionalists, who believe in evolutionary change, were aghast. And that's why there was the huge scale demonstrations at Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar against the express orders of Brigadier General Dyer. There was the Amritsar massacre that April. So Dyer shot dead at least 479 civilians, unarmed. It may have been multiples of that, certainly many multiples of that figure were wounded. So it was willful murder. So people were furious. Anyway, but he carried on agitation. There was great unrest in India, and he was a major donor to the Congress Party, employing many Congress Party activists. And he opened Birla House to high-ranking Congress Party activists, his house in Delhi, which is open to the public, which indeed I visited. But he was free all through the Second World War. The Quit India campaign, he lent his support to that, but he didn't transgress the law. I mean, perhaps he was just too important. Oh, I see a fox behind me. That the Britannic authorities didn't dare put him in handcuffs because they thought there'll be uproar. He was an establishment figure. Even those who are neutral in politics, even those who are pro-British, thought, you mustn't lay a finger on him. So he was respected even by his opponents. And so Indian independence finally came, as everybody knows, the 15th of August 1947. And then Gandhi was aghast that there was the partition of India. He said it was vivisection. He was vehemently opposed to Pakistan's secession from the new independent India. But then Gandhi said, okay, we must achieve reconciliation with our brothers, planned to go on a peace mission to Pakistan. Remember, this infant Pakistan had attacked India only weeks after independence, attacked Jammu and Kashmir, because of course the Maharaja of Kashmir had not opted for either dominion, either Pakistan or India. So a Hindu princeling of a state which is something like 70% Muslim, Pakistan invaded, then the Maharaja ceded to India, and the first Indo-Pak War commenced. But that petered out after a while. The United Nations managed to broker a ceasefire. But Narayan Apte and Nathuram Godse, they were horrified that Gandhi, whom they'd held in high regard as a pious Hindu, was willing to countenance the partition of India, say, no, forgive and forget. India is one, India is eternal. And that's why he was going to lead a prayer meeting at the Birla House in January 1948. That's why Gandhi was shot dead by one of them. And last words being, Hey Ram, oh God. And you can see the point. They put a swastika, as in the Hindu symbol, on the floor at the point where he was fatally shot, struck by a single bullet. And near Birla House, indeed, is a museum which contains the gun that was used to kill Gandhi. So he lived on right up until 1983. He happened to die here in London, the age of, was it 89? Well known for his benefactions in India and overseas, very highly regarded, very close to a number of prime ministers, awarded India's second highest civilian honour. I dare not try and pronounce it because I'm sure I'll mangle it. So that is him. Unfortunately died in Londinium and was cremated here. I'm not sure whether his ashes have been retained by his family or been scattered elsewhere. Some ashes are in the columbarium. So, and there, you see, there is Mr. Fox, there's Reynard. But, and there's around the pedestal, it's got some quotations from him. What we call life is a wonderful journey full of purpose when the mission is realized. The person passes away, and this is the eternal law of nature. And it's got inscriptions in what's in Hindi as well. And then in some other language. Is it Rajasthani? Is there such a language? Excuse my ignorance. Or is it Marwari? I don't think it's Sanskrit. Ever engaged in actions, always thinking. Refuge in me by my grace. My devotee attains the eternal, imperishable abode. And that's from the Bhagavad Gita. Right, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.